We're here to talk through this visionary Tapa. It's a puzzle whose difficulty might stem just from the new gray cell rules, particularly that you're now looking at potentially 16 cells that will be shaded with these clues, but that sort of sphere of 16 cells is a little distant from what you're used to thinking about. And even key observations in this puzzle, for instance, this group with 13 shaded cells defined and 3 unshaded cells defined has fully used all this space. So they're only singleton spaces and they exactly separate these groups. Similarly, there's actually that limitation with this 6222 where there are 12 shaded cells and 4 unshaded cells, but they're singletons that go away. So the same way, like in a regular Tapa, a 3-3 clue, you'd say, well, that's 3 with a space, 3 with a space, and can use that powerfully. It's actually recognizing these cells come together that's fairly powerful. And in particular, there's a region which is right here, which is between these two adjacent clues, which is actually, I think, the most critical deduction in the puzzle. It's probably something solvers will run into in the middle of their solve, or maybe not even see at all. They'll get it by guessing. But right at the start, we can see that we're going to be shading stretches of clues. And if I put in a single space, for instance here, I'm going to be forced to shade 3 more cells based on this clue. If we look at the black cells, the black clues around this clue, though, we see that we're going to have a large issue shading more than 2 cells in a row right in the space. That will tell you that cells like this can't be unused. This cell can't be unused. And symmetrically, this cell and this cell can't be unused. That we're forced to place the single space exactly at this corner so that we can fulfill this clue, and that's going to require at least 3 cells shaded in each direction, but at the same time fulfill the top part of this clue and get just 2 cells in each of these spaces. So once you actually solve in from the corners to the middle, it's critical to actually resolve this information in the center. Something else we can actually do, which is fun, it's sort of the case like with a 1-3-1 clue. Once you place a space, you can do certain shading things around the other spaces. We don't know if this is a 3 or a 7, but whichever it is, these cells get shaded. And similarly, these cells get shaded. So a 3-7-3 will always have its spaces 4 apart. One of these 3 cells can be filled in, but it's actually possible to start to mark all of that. How is that maybe helpful for us? Well, we could actually do some more work with the 2-2-2-2 clues here in gray, but let's just actually sort of go back to where most solvers will start with this puzzle and then connect into the center later. I think most solvers will start with these 2 corners. This corner is very quickly defined. Even from the standard Tapa clues, you get a 1-1 filling like so. The 2-2 in the next ring outwards from the visionary Tapa clues here is also forced. If we connect down along this bottom edge, we have to work with a 3-3 in this ring of cells. Notice that we need to shade at least this cell or that cell, but if we shade the bottom cell, we're not going to be able to use a 3 clue. So it has to use the top and come around like this. We still need to place a 2 somewhere in the space, and that 2 is going to use this cell. And we need to place a 3 in these 4 cells, and if it used all of these 3 cells, it would form a 2x2 square, so it can't use the upper leftmost cell in that group. And looks like this. So that fully completes these clues. We can do a little thinking on this edge as well. So one of these 2 cells is used, and it's going to wrap 5 cells around, so it would be either this or this. These cells are in common in those 2 shadings. Now, if we hadn't gotten the center before, there's a way to think through which direction this 5 goes based on the second ring of clues. So right now we have the 2 defined down here. We have a 1, which could be a 3 over here. We wouldn't actually have this shaded in, but since we made this big breakthrough, you'll see that the 3 block has to be right where marked. That places the 1 here. This 3 group using this cell, and this is the critical one you can define, regardless of knowing any other information, forces the 5 to come to the left. One of these cells is used, and that finishes off that clue. We now, working in the center, have the 7 region, can mark these. And again, there's more we can do in the center, but let's come to this other corner, which is the other place some people will start. This starts from looking at the 4. The 4 uses these 3 cells out of the 5. It can use either of these, but at least uses these cells. It's helpful to then mark that the unused cell in the 3-3 group right here is going to be one of these 2. As in standard Tapa, we can identify that these other cells must be shaded. Notice that this 3 block is up to the top, so we're going to have a 1 and a 1 somewhere on these sides. So the next thing to really look at, we said at the start that this 6222 was full. We've actually started to shade some elements of the ring, whether it's just knowing these 3 or even having that empty cell. There's a lot we can do. When we actually have both of those facts together, we know exactly where the 6 goes, which means we can immediately fill out the whole ring. Again, this is just recognizing the power of all 16 cells being defined and having a few of them put in. The 131, as in standard Tapa, will have to use just singleton groups as it gets shaded, or single empty cells that get shaded. For connectivity, the cell gets filled in, that leaves us open. Notice that Tapa right now is isolated across this diagonal. So it's going to need to come here to stay connected. This has to come here to stay connected. We can look, now let's actually just come up a little more on this side. We can look at this 2-2 group. It's got one group of 2 cells, this group of 2 cells, this group of 2 cells, and it's going to have something that extends from this direction as the last set. It's important to see that these cells can't be used in that group. You can't shade both of them. That would cause an issue here, and because it's part of this 2-2 ring, 2-2-2-2 ring around this group that's there. So we're left with just one cell for the 1. That comes over here. We now have even more of a separation of the Tapa. What we see is we have a group here and a group here that need to both get connected. We have 2 options around this 3-3 clue, but the one that keeps these cells blank is going to fully isolate those regions below. So the empties have to come over to this side. We do have to account for the remaining cells. You'll see that this is a 1 group, this is a 1 group, and this is the 3 group up top. So for these clues, that's what fills out that space. The cell gets shaded to complete connectivity based on this outer 3 group clue. That finishes this out. We've now completed the 4 here, so the 1 has to look like this. We get into this space, and around this clue we have these rings, but we see at the start we at least have to fill in a 2 large block. We'll also have to put in a 3 large block. We could actually look right now and place it, because it can't sit here, it would cause issues with this group. The only place it can go is over like this. This group at the top has to stay connected, so this has to come straight across. That completes the top group. Looking at the last clue we haven't really used, this 6 cells, 236 is in this outer ring. This is part of a group that's already 4 large, so it will become the group that's 6 large. This needs another cell to at least be 2 large. We have a 131, which just always means that we shade immediately after any empty cells. This cell has to be used. Sort of the first look. For connectivity of the Tapa, this top one has to get used. Again, for connectivity of the Tapa, these cells have to be used. The 2 and 3 groups are there, so we get this unmarked and we fill this in. So we finished the puzzle. There are a lot of distinct entry points, but as I highlighted at the start, I think the hardest one is just seeing how this outer ring of 16 cells, mostly specified by these clues, and this inner ring of a 2-2 clue leads to this cell being unused. That if you can see that deduction, the rest of the puzzle is a little more standard from there. Otherwise, you know, with most of these Tapa variations this week, we've seen how some unique clues really build out more from the style. Serkan's really great at writing these puzzles, and as you'll see over the year, and even with other things we put on the site already, that there'll be lots more variations to come. So Hope you learned something from this talk through, and we'll see you again soon.